I grew up with many scary things on the doorstep of my childhood home at Bedford Citrus Estates in the foothills of the Catberg Mountains of the rural Eastern Cape. Some kids grow up having to face far worse things, such as war and all its horrific brutalities. As a farmer's son, I was brought up in the supposedly idyllic world of orange orchards and irrigation furrows. But even as a small child, I knew that the ghosts of violence hung in the air. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them. In 1879, only 80 years before my birth, the frontier wars over the land came to an end, with the Kai River accepted as the boundary. I was to discover that possession of the piece of land, now called Bedford Citrus Estates, covered by the peaceful-looking orange trees my great-grandfather had planted in the early 1900s, had once been hotly contested by Xhosa pastoralist warriors, British settlers, and the Boers. When I was a child, nobody ever told me about these conflicts. It has been said that Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, described how, after landing at the airports of certain countries, he could smell blood in the air, a fact that would make him cancel his visit and fly straight back home to Switzerland. It was as if this same smell hung in the air of the Eastern Cape world that surrounded me. One evening, when I was about 4 years old, I was woken in the deep of the night by a violent hammering on our kitchen door. My father, Llewellyn, opened it to find a Xhosa woman on the doorstep. Her husband had sliced her open in a drunken frenzy. As my father drove her down the dirt road to the hospital, 8 kilometers away in the town of Fort Beaufort, the poor woman's intestines had to be held in her stomach cavity by my mother. Luckily, the woman made a full recovery. I also recall one Saturday afternoon when I watched a fight between a colored man we called Lawish. His name was actually Louis, who was armed with a knife, and a Xhosa man called Mzwandile, who was armed with a kiri. That's a knob stick, isgweba in Xhosa. Their confrontation took place at the farm labourers' huts. Everyone had been drinking a lot of booze, and their blood was hot for violence. The women screamed and wailed, while the winds of a brewing thunderstorm blasted into the bushes, shaking them violently and whipping up clouds of dust, all adding to what seemed to me a frenzied madness. Fortunately for my innocent young eyes, Lawish was hit by such severe blows that he crumbled to the ground before he could stab and draw blood, and the fight ended. Still, I felt numbed by this vista of violence. If I had been given the choice right there and then, I might have liked, even as a delinquent, to have made like Jung and left that place for good. In the 1830s, my great-great-grandfather, Daniel Roberts, had the temerity and good faith to trek eastwards from the Albany district, where most of the 1820 settlers had established themselves, generally as farmers. He set up a trading store on or near the banks of the Peddy River. He was also a lay preacher for the Wesleyan Church in the Grahamstown district. It was in this capacity that Daniel played a part in organizing and paying for a son of the Xhosa chief Ncika to travel by ship to Scotland to attend boarding school there. In 1837, the Xhosa rose up and invaded the Cape Colony from the east. If you ask me, the authorities in England should have been more honest with the 1820 settlers, who were sent to a strange, dangerous land, basically to act as a buffer between the Xhosa and the Cape Colony. Early one morning, the house of my great-great-grandfather was surrounded by a horde of young warriors. While his trading store was being plundered and burnt, he was asked to send his wife and children away,